Excellent. Right. I would like to offer a very warm welcome to Caroline and Thomas, who are going to talk to us today about all things Alexa. So I will now hand over to you both.
Perfect. Thanks, Joanna. Great. So Thomas and I are going to do a double act for you today. Thomas is in charge of the slides, so hopefully it works okay. I'm in Inverness today with other meetings, so I'm glad that this is working with all the tech. If there is any issues, Thomas, you can take over, yeah? Yeah. Awesome. So let's get into the slides. Do you want to go to the next one? So we're going to be talking about how to get started with building Alexa experiences. I wanted to give you a little bit of background. So we run a smart home technology company called TL Tech, and when we started our business in 2016, we saw ourselves as the plumbers of the smart home world. You know, we thought we'd just be helping people install systems and get them connected, get them working. And what we actually really quickly realized is that the people that can benefit from these technologies the most are actually the least likely to be able to access them. And, you know, since then, we've just been on an amazing journey helping people to transform their lives with tech. And then the COVID-19 pandemic came along and we couldn't go to people's houses anymore. And so we then set about helping people remotely. So we created lots of resources and ran lots of tutorials online, essentially teaching people how to do what we had been doing for them, and learning how to use Alexa. So we knew that people were feeling lonely and anxious about the situation and wanted to stay in touch with their families, and the Alexas are a really, really good way to do that. So that's what we did. And as we started to learn ourselves more about Alexa and how it works, we realized that in the same way as you get apps for mobile phones, you actually get apps for voice assistants. By saying the same way, it's similar, but not the same. I think when I say the same, I guess I'm meaning that we're anticipating that things will grow in a similar way. So the mobile phone app market is massive now, and I think voice apps is going to go in a similar direction where there's more and more functionality added to the devices. So what I wanted to do next was just share a little bit more around some of our learnings. Thomas is the real technical brains behind all of this, so he'll be able to tell you a bit more about some of our big tips and lessons learned. So I'll focus on some of the trends. Thomas, if you go to the next slide, I have 3 key trends that I wanted to highlight because I do think they're quite important. The first one is around voice control and how massive that's becoming. So there is a big shift to voice, and the pandemic has helped with this as well, because it's, you know, it's hygienic. You know, people can talk rather than touch buttons or screens, so it's reducing that physical contact. This slide here just shows you, even before the pandemic, that kind of trajectory and the growth of 4,000 devices in 2017 that were Alexa compatible, and now we have over 100,000 different devices. And the next trend is around how we search for things with our voice, so how we get information. So if you go to the next one, Thomas. So when we're searching for things, I think brands are really waking up to this and realizing that, you know, they need to adapt and become relevant to consumers and make sure that their information is accessible, and that it's opening up opportunities for them to serve their customers in different ways. Human behavior actually with search, you know, it's been evolving anyway. So when Google first started, people might type in just single words, and now we search with whole fully formed questions and expect to get really good targeted responses that answer our questions. And I think what's interesting about voice is that it's not like on a Google search where you can kind of scroll through and kind of eyeball which one you think is going to be the one that's going to answer your question the best. There's maybe a little bit less transparency when it comes to voice, in that is the response, in fact, the best one that answers or addresses your need? And also, it is quite difficult to program in the search results in a way that makes it easy for people to go through and say, okay, no, show me the next one, show me the next one. So there's some design aspects to that as well. The other thing that I was going to talk about when I talk about search is actually the discoverability of voice applications. So because it's quite a new area, unfortunately, as a developer, it's really difficult for you to, or for people to find you. So if you go onto the Amazon skill store, for example, it's not particularly user-friendly and it's not laid out in a very good way for consumers. And the different types of applications, so Thomas will talk a bit more about this, but things like flash briefings versus standard skills or more developed skills, you can't differentiate them as a user. So it does make our life as developers a lot harder to help people learn about how voice applications work and how to find the right ones. Oh, no, sorry. No, no problem. Yes, so Thomas will talk to you a bit more about that and about how the things that you can do to help with discoverability. And then the last trend that I wanted to cover was around the purchasing side of things. So this is a bit of data from PwC, and their report, they quiz people about their buying habits and what electronic devices are they using to shop. And this actually surprised me that 42% of people had said that they had purchased online via a voice assistant. And I guess it would surprise me because I've never bought anything with my Alexa or with my Siri, with my voice, but that is definitely going to increase over time. And I think the thing that's really magical about voice is how seamless it is, how frictionless it is. And I guess if you're familiar with designing tech and things, it's all about reducing that friction and making it as easy as possible for the user. So that is definitely a growing trend. And I think the other thing that's really interesting about voice is how, in terms of our brains and how our human brains work, audio content is really memorable. So if you think about radio adverts and jingles, they stick in your brain. So on the voice side of things, having that audio identity is really important. So for example, in our skill that we have developed, we have a skill called Kind Space. We developed our own specific sound, which is a sonic branding sound. So it's like a logo, but you hear it rather than see it. And I think there's a lot of fun things I think that could come in the future with the kind of commerce side of things and the ways in which we can purchase things, and maybe it's as part of an entertaining experience that you're doing that purchasing. So yeah, all new ways that we could use it that we haven't even thought about yet, which is exciting. And then a couple more slides for me. So one is just a little summary on the characteristics of some of the things that you think about when you're designing things. So I've got a nice little word cloud here. The key things to think about is that it's an information exchange, but it's not a one-sided process. So you have to think about how you can make it engaging, so a nice, pleasant experience, but also that you're really thinking about making it simple and intuitive, because you might not have any visual cues to help the person navigate the experience. So how can you keep them on track if they kind of stray somewhere else? How do you kind of bring them back to completing the transaction or completing the conversation? What's the end goal? How do you kind of keep them on track? And then it's also really important to think about who's going to be using this. So, a lot of people, English is not their first language. So there's different regional accents as well. In Scotland, we have a huge range of different dialects and accents, and Scottish accents in particular, Alexa's not great with. She's getting better. I have to say, we've noticed over the last few months, there's new words like place names in Scotland that she's actually now able to understand. She'll hear them and know what you've said, and then equally she'll say them back. Like the good one that we spotted just a couple of weeks ago was Milgai, which is a place outside of Glasgow. And yeah, she can say that properly. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's amazing, because she couldn't do that before. So it's always getting better, but it is something to consider when you're building something and testing it. Another little thing maybe to think about is the environment that the person will be in. So if it was like a cookery skill or something like that, is there going to be background noise or something else that's going to be distracting the user that might make it more difficult for them to kind of complete the steps in the activity. So the very last slide that I have before I hand over to Thomas is just a really quick summary of all the benefits. If you keep clicking, then they'll all come up, Thomas. So if you were looking at designing something perhaps for a business or a charity or some kind of user-centered organization, it can be very powerful with building relationships and that brand recognition. It can help you access support for people who maybe have low digital skills. So people that might struggle with tablets and devices, and it just makes it easier for them, reduces friction. It can be safer because it's a no-touch solution. There's opportunities, like I was saying, on the commerce side of things, to create new user experiences that people are willing to pay for. And as an internal tool, actually, there could be benefits in using it as a way of sharing information internally. So things around meeting room availability or holidays, you could say, is Joanna on holiday just now? And then Alexa would come back and say, yeah, but she's back on Tuesday, maybe helpful things like that. So yeah, maybe think about, is there ways that you could use it in terms of communications or things internally that can share information in a way that's really efficient and you're not having to go into a spreadsheet somewhere to pull out information. Yeah, so that is me, and now I'll hand over to Thomas.
Hello. Hopefully the microphone's working better now. So,
sounding good.
Good. I'll apologise if you hear lawnmowers outside. The first thing to say is there's different types of skills, like Caroline alluded to. So the sort of three main ones are flash briefings, blueprints, and then you have your specific skills, like for specific applications or custom skills. But kind of briefly, the flash briefing is an audio only. So it's either an audio file that you upload and it plays, or you can put in text and it does Alexa text to speech instead of Alexa's voice. There's no user interaction with them. They're the ones that you set to play in the morning when you get up, and it maybe reads you the news or your favorite podcast or tip of the day, like I'm trying to get everyone doing, or can read you the weather. Blueprints are no code, simple interactions and automations. There's a lot of templates to create them from. They're mainly for your personal use, but you can share them onto the skill store if you want. You create them, you can do it directly through your mobile device, or you can go online to blueprints.amazon.co.uk and create the blueprints, and it'll work on your device and other people don't need to even know it exists. And then you've got your skills for specific applications like games or music or video and that, smart home things, that type of stuff. And they're more created in the Alexa developer console, and there are templates specifically to help you get you started on creating ones for specific applications. And then you've got custom skills where you could generally build anything you can imagine. You can either start from a blank page, find a template that's similar and try and modify it, or find an example that somebody has done from GitHub or somewhere else online and work on modifying that as well. And then when you're creating a skill in the developer console, or you can use the command line interface, or there's various ways to do it. The developer console is the easiest way to get started. There's two main programming languages. So your first decision to make is whether you prefer to try and do it in Python or Node.js. I'm not sure if there's benefits either way. A lot of people prefer one or the other. And then you need to define sort of your tech stack, as you would call it. If you're using directly hosted in the developer console, it's all there. It's really easy to use S3 and DynamoDB, and all the stuff is there for you. We currently host our skill in AWS, and we still use Amazon S3, the AWS Lambda to store the skill in, DynamoDB for persistent attributes and things, and CloudWatch for logs, as well as GitHub. So we always have that backup of our code stored in GitHub. You're not going to lose it. You have history, so you can go back through. So that's all another part of your tech stack. I'd almost recommend GitHub for anybody doing any kind of coding at all. Yeah, and S3 is good for your input data and file storage, so simple files. DynamoDB is good for, it's a database, so it's better for persistent data and storing things that can be used again and again when people come back. And then in actual creating your skill, there's kind of some important tips that hopefully you can learn from our experience and our mistakes, if you like. The first one that's possibly the most important and trickiest choice to make, which we didn't realize at the time, is choosing your invocation name. And that the invocation name is what the user says to open your skill. It should be, hopefully, you'd choose it to be similar or the same as what your name of your skill is. It could be completely different. Your skill could be called, I don't know, your skill could be called how to do a presentation, and your invocation name could be teacup, and that wouldn't make much sense, but you could still do it. So your invocation name needs to be a minimum of 2 words. They need to be real words and not made up words. You're not allowed to use certain words like bad language. There's reserved words that Amazon have for Alexa functionality, like play and certain ones I can't think of off the top of my head. But yeah, the hardest bit with choosing the invocation name, and it's getting more difficult every day, is that it needs to not be too similar to anybody else's. So you really need to put in the time and the work to look in the skill store, see what other skills are there. And sometimes, like I said, other skills will have a different invocation name from the actual skill name. So you need to do a deeper digging to try and make sure, because we went through a long time of every time you said kind space, she would assume you meant headspace. And yeah, so there's lots of effort trying to get the right invocation names to work. And to help you out as well, you can choose a tagline to add on to that name to help you in searching in the skill store, because the skill store is notoriously bad for searching. So if you choose a tagline to go with your skill name, then it makes searching much easier. Like the one for kind space is track and improve your well-being. So you can type that whole thing in, it'll find it. Or if someone's searching for well-being, then kind space comes up as well. I need to remember that your name and tagline is limited to a maximum of 50 characters. And some more tips. So the conversations in your skill, because essentially that's how the users interact. It's a conversation back and forth. They're designed with what's called slots and intents. So essentially you're defining what the user can say to your device and what Alexa does when it hears certain things, and and that kind of builds up the interaction. But it does have the limits of sometimes making conversations quite closed, and it can be very easy just to get into the yes, no sort of scenario. So you just ask them a question, get a yes or no, and keep asking. And it can be quite tricky to try and build it out to a more natural conversation. But you can do that with a bit of effort as well. You need to plan out your steps in the conversation. So it's quite good to do a simple block flow diagram or some visual way at seeing the path that you want the user to take. And then that can help you program it a bit better as well. Remember not to give people too many choices because they tend to get lost. You wouldn't want to ask them to choose between 5 or 6 things and then they're like, I can't remember what the first ones were. So try and build that out. And even if you're intending on using visuals, which we call documents, so APL documents, Alexa presentation language documents, we find it's always best to work from a voice first design theory. So assume that the person using it has a speaker and not a device with a screen. So design it first for the people that only have a speaker and only using their voice. And then you can add in the visuals later and try and make them as good as you can and add that extra functionality. Because as well as looking nice, you can add buttons, so the touch functionality and many other things on the screen as well. And like Caroline said, there's certain words and things that Alexa struggles to pronounce. We found particularly Scottish words, but I'm sure many people have found issues in their own language or dialect. You can correct a lot of the words using SSML, which stands for Speech Synthesis Markup Language. So that's another one that you'll need to go through. And sometimes she struggles hearing words, but you can correct this again in the code. Like every time you say tip, she hears top. You could program it in to say, add that as a synonym. That's a word I hate. So you can add in words and you can start to see, oh, whenever I say this, she thinks I'm saying something else. And as long as it makes sense, you can add that into the code so that it doesn't matter what she thinks she said, it still does the same thing. But as you progress and increase the number of users and testers and things in your skill, you can fine tune all those things and make it as good as it possibly can be. And I suppose that's the goal. And back to Caroline, I think, on that one.
Perfect. So we'll just do a wee summary. This last slide is actually really useful because it's got lots of signposting for you, and then we'll be ready to take questions. So you may gather we love Alexa. We think it's a really exciting space to work in. There's so many use cases that haven't been invented yet. So getting more people, building the community and getting more people involved is great. So we were really, we were delighted to be invited to come along. Thank you, Joanne, for organising. So yeah, just a few things here. Definitely worth checking out the skills kit information. Amazon themselves, they've spent a lot of time over the last 12 months updating a lot of the tutorials and a lot of the information. They have a new, it's like an academy type thing that they're rolling out, which they just launched at the latest Alexa developer conference a couple of weeks ago. So we're still coming through in dribs and drabs, but once you're in the ecosystem, you can start to sign up for early access to a lot of these sorts of things. They are really good at going live every week for Q&A sessions, and then they're all recorded on the YouTube channel, so you can go back and you can watch old Q&A sessions on certain topics, which is really helpful. A lot of the work that we did when we started, we used the Dabble Lab resources. So they have tutorials and kind of worked examples. You can kind of take the code and customize it. So that's a really good resource. And then if you are kind of right at the start of your journey, Code Academy have some really basic introductory free courses, so definitely check that out as well. The community side of things is good. So the GitHub side of things, there's lots of code repositories where you can get examples that you can customize. On the visuals for the screens, there's a little home called APL Ninja, which is super fun. And I think sometimes Thomas goes down rabbit holes playing about with the code on the screens, because there's some really, people have made some amazing games. Actually, gaming is one of the biggest growth areas within the Alexa skill store. And in terms of the monetization of those games, there's some developers out there making some really decent money with the games they've created. So definitely have a look at APL Ninja. And then the Slack group is really good. It took us a long time actually to cotton on to the Slack group and how useful it is, because when you're stuck with stuff, post it on the Slack group, and then the community there or the Amazon team will come back, and they'll come back and help you sort out whatever it is that you're stuck with. And then it's just a little summary of some of the things that we've talked about. I wrote a little blog piece earlier in the year. I did a presentation similar to this at another event, and so there's a blog piece there with more links and information around some of the trends and things that we've discovered along our journey. And that is us.
Wow, brilliant. Thank you so much. There were so many aspects to that even just the starting to search for stuff completely makes sense. It's like, how do you find out what works? What would you say? I mean, obviously, if anybody else has questions, please ask away. But I guess to sort of get us started, what would you say is the most sort of in demand in terms of the voice activation at the moment with kind of, you know, if you're building out that smart home element, you know, does it tend to be a certain sector, a certain type of ask you're getting?
So do you mean more on the smart home side of things, or do you mean more on the app side of things? Yeah, so I mean, the great thing about Alexa is, like I showed in that graph, there's so many Alexa compatible devices now, and it's the really simple use cases like the smart plugs that allow you to then switch things on and off with your voice, because it's so affordable, and it replaces like the kind of original technology where you got like the little RF remote control, and it was for the plugs that were down the back of the TV that you can reach. And I guess they were sold as a kind of energy saving thing, but actually from an accessibility point of view, now having Alexa able to get to those awkward switches that you can't get to just with your voice is really good. And even, you know, things like if you go to bed at night and you remember you've left a light on, you know, you can check if the light's on and you can switch it off with your voice without having to go all the way back downstairs. So yeah, there's a lot of really nice, simple things like that.
Does anybody else have any questions? Go on, Jean. And then I think Debbie afterwards took her mic off.
This has been very, very interesting, because my husband brought an Alexa device into our home, I don't know, maybe a year ago. And I was totally, what did you do that for? Those things listen to you, and I'm not comfortable with that at all. And I know their point is to listen to you, but I just really, really didn't like it. So he uses it to play music, generally in a room I'm not in. My toddler was trying to make it work yesterday. He loved the flashing colours, my grandson toddler. So I imagine it won't be long before he learns what he has to say once he can speak to switch it on and make it do things, because he'll just copy Grandad, and that's scary and fascinating. But I suppose so I'm thinking, okay, there's clearly good in this, and I'm going to have to get comfortable. Are people not concerned about it as a listening device? Do you meet that resistance, or is that just me?
No, absolutely, all the time, and it genuinely is. You know, absolutely, people will have concerns about that. And so due to the pandemic, when we were teaching people more about Alexas and using them as a communication device, that was the number one pushback was, oh, but it's listening all the time, and people worried about their data and where their data goes. And so a lot of our tutorials and the teaching that we've shared and the information that we have on our website is to show people how they can go in and they can see their data and they can see the transcriptions. They can set their preferences about what happens with the data. And you can even, it's really easy to delete stuff. You just say, Alexa, delete everything I said today, and then she'll just delete it. So as well as being able to kind of interrogate and go in through the app and through the web console and see your own information, it's as easy as doing it with your voice as well. But I think it's that not knowing. I think it's not intuitive for people to know that. And so having someone to help them and kind of reassure them that they can have control over all this information it is helpful. And then the listening all the time, she's listening for her wake word. So there's a very limited number of words that she should respond to. And then if she responds by accident, what you should see when you go into the transcriptions is that it won't have actually transcribed anything that it heard by accident, because she'll know, because you're not giving her a command, that she shouldn't have activated herself.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's a whole, maybe not this year, maybe next year or the year after, Joe, but I feel there's a whole cybersecurity, simple, like telling people how to be safe as you do now, just with spam emails and passwords and things. There'll be, could be a whole
almost like safe setup as well, because how configurable is it? Because I know it basically it streams everything, but you can configure it to a certain extent, can't you, so that it's not recording everything?
Yeah, so you can set it so that it doesn't record any of your data, so it's not sharing any of that data with Amazon. I guess what we do say to people is that in some respects, sharing your data has a benefit because it can improve the user experience. So particularly for us in Scotland, them having a little data set of Scottish voices is actually really beneficial. And that's probably how she knows how to say Milgai and not Milgavi.
I'm not going to join in this debate because I always lose.
Yeah, but actually what Jane's saying about security is really important, because unfortunately in the developer world there are some really bad cowboys out there. We had one particular developer that basically ripped off our whole app, and also worse than that was taking personal information from users without their permissions. So when you build a skill, you can request certain permissions for Amazon to share information like an email address or access to a calendar, to be able to put reminders in. So there's certain permissions that as a developer you can ask for. And you shouldn't circumvent that. So you shouldn't add those permissions into your own conversation. Like if you wanted to know someone's name or email address, you're not supposed to say, what is your name or what is your email address? You're supposed to get them to do that through the Amazon account. And unfortunately, there are developers that circumvent that. And users will be giving away their name without realizing what they're doing. So I think more publicity around that would be good, because and even with privacy policies, I was talking about this earlier this morning. So when you go on a website, you get the cookie thing, you don't read it, you push the button. It's not as transparent as that for voice. So someone can enable the application on their device with their voice. So there is no step where they're presented with, here's my privacy policy, here's my terms of use, here's how I'm going to honor and respect and look after your data. They don't get the opportunity to see that up front, and most people probably won't go onto a website even to check that. So yeah, it's definitely a big one for us.
Debbie, did I see you take your mic off? Did you have a question as well?
The first one kind of flows from what we've just been discussing. I wondered if there is a way that for a particular app or skill that you're advertising in the store, you can set it so that the default is that it doesn't sort of records the information and doesn't share it with Alexa or Amazon.
Okay, so that's a good question. So I guess if I'm interpreting this correctly, then us as a developer, we could decide that whatever someone said to us when they were in our experience, that wouldn't be transcribed within the main Amazon system. So as far as I know, that's not a thing. I don't think that is, but I can see how that would be beneficial potentially, and actually users might feel reassured in that if they're working with an organization, like, so we're going to be doing a skill very soon with the Alliance, making a voice version of the Alice website that they have, which is a services directory. So that's obviously a service that people will know and trust, but they might not trust Amazon. So then you're giving people a choice about, yeah, who sees that data. That's a really interesting question, Debbie.
Yeah, just wondering if you could do that as a default, because I think maybe being sort of quite suspicious of that kind of things, and rather than remember to do it, I personally would rather and be much more confident and more likely to down or to use an application where that is the default setting, and I have to actively choose if I want to go and share information.
Yeah, and that's another good point, and that the default settings are that you're automatically, as soon as you set your account up, sharing your data with Amazon. And this is why we teach people this. You have to go into the settings and change it if you want to change it. The default isn't that they don't take any data, and you have to go in and tell them, oh, actually I would be comfortable with you taking my data. It's the other way around. So that's another really important point.
That's the reason why I don't think I'll be using it anytime.
I mean, you can go in and you can change the settings. It's just people don't usually have the knowledge to know that, unfortunately.
The other at the moment, but I think other people had some questions, didn't they? And thank you very much, Carol.
Debbie, I think your microphone's going in and out of sound. So I think my guess is that you said you have another question, but there might be someone else from the floor. But we've kind of booked the hour, so as long as everybody's happy, I'm sure we'll get around to all of them. Janice, I'm just going to check in. I know you'd put a question on the chat, and I think Thomas has answered it. But if you do have any more, please do say. Jean, I know you also said you had another question. You're on mute now. That has a whole new level, doesn't it, when we're talking about voice activation?
I will have endless questions as ever. A quick one was, can you ask Alexa, just in response to what you were saying, Caroline, about the default is Alexa goes, I'll just suck everything in. Can you ask Alexa, how do I set you to keep me safe? And will it talk you through?
No, I don't know if there is anything like that, but that would be really nice, wouldn't it? I think
doesn't it?
You can ask her about some of the privacy settings, but I don't think it's that intuitive. I think it basically says go into the settings and check them.
Okay.
Which, if you're not familiar with how it works, or maybe you are someone with low digital literacy, are you going to have to get someone to help you to check your settings? Yeah.
Whilst I always was resistant to Alexa, I could actually see that there was potential to help old people. So I was thinking of my mum at the time and thinking, we can't get her to use mobile phones. She just can't. I just couldn't, with all my training skills, get her to work. One, I wonder if we could get her an Alexa device. I just didn't know enough about them to know what I could, but it was at the back of my head that it might be a thing. And so are there a lot of old people's homes, or the sort of charities that are helping people to stay longer in their own homes? Are they picking this up and really getting with it? Are you aware?
It is happening in small pockets, and it's more at a pilot stage in most places. So for assisted living for adults, they're starting to use them more. So the charity that I work with in Aberdeen, Inspire, they've started to kind of roll them out there. but it's still more a pilot stage. It's really disjointed. I would love to see more sharing of knowledge and lessons learned, and like, for example, what we found at Inspire was, if you go in with a whole functional thing, like here's this Alexa and it's going to do this and this and this, then it's probably not going to work. And actually this is what happens with our customers. Actually what happens much better is for you to say to them, what's the one thing that you would love to do, or what do you enjoy doing, what are your hobbies, and then you can find something on the device as a hook. So if it's football, or whatever the topic is, the guys at Inspire, they like checking the football score. And then Spotify playlists, they're a really nice touch for people to be able to listen to music, photographs, and actually, I mean, the reason we loved the Alexa devices and focused on them so much is, for someone who's scared of technology, they don't even need to answer the call at the other end. You can set up a special kind of call called a drop-in, and the drop-in is a very secure call that you only allow permission to certain people to drop in. So they're just there and the call will answer and they don't have to do anything, which is magic.
Yeah, it seems like so I love the fact that you're thinking, and I'm thinking, how can I make that happen? That collaboration and learning from each other, because that's a very big thing. I would love to help with. But also there's a lot to be learning from the old-fashioned digital skills, if we're going to call them that, because that same, if you want a hook to get someone to become digitally enabled, thinking smartphones, PCs, tablets and whatever, then find something they're interested in and use that, because that's how you'll get them sucked in the nicest possible positive way.
Yeah, that's their confidence. Yeah.
Same. So we should be sharing those too. Inspire, I did some work with Inspire a couple of years ago. They were lovely people.
Yes, I know. I totally love them. They're so nice.
Thank you. I'll shut up now and let someone else speak.
No worries. Does anybody else have any questions that they want to ask now?
Sorry, can I add a comment on the assisted living? Alexa's in America, Amazon's really big on it, and they have actually released the way they've done for hospitality and hotels, so they are doing it. But actually at this very moment, they've got a competition open to people to design skills for seniors, which they class as over 55s. So if you are interested, it's certainly something you should be looking at.
Yeah, definitely. Yes, that is definitely on our radar. So they have a $50,000 prize package. I think the top prize is $15,000. There's 4 different categories, so they're looking at things around like relationships, activity, helping people with things around the home. I can't remember what the other one was. There's 4 different topics, and then there's a prize for each of them as well. And then it says that you'll get a meeting with a Alexa representative. I don't know exactly what that means. My wish was like Jeff Blankenberg coming to our house for coffee. That would be nice. He keeps doing all these videos. If you watch his videos online, he's always at people's houses for coffee. So yeah, if other people are interested in checking it out, I think it closes towards the end of September, so there's still a wee bit of time. Yeah, and then we could get some Scottish representation.
Yeah, and it definitely shows that they see that as an area of growth rather than before they've done things with kids' games or whatever, but they obviously see this as a really big area of, and they keep saying things like, to help fight loneliness and to keep people in their homes longer. And so I do think it is a very, if you've got ideas, it is a growth area to move into.
Yeah, and they have an Alexa Care package, so I think it's like $19.99 a month or something. I don't think it's available here in the UK yet, but the idea is that allows the care circle to help with that kind of wraparound care and maintaining someone's independence and quality of life. So yeah, they are getting big into health, aren't they?
That's great to hear. Actually, I already know a friend's dad who got an ambulance because of Alexa. if you know what I mean.
Yeah, and actually that is a good one to mention. So there is a help function, so you can set up like an SOS number, so that basically if you said Alexa help, that would call your SOS number, and then it also sends a notification to their mobile. So if you didn't answer that call, the notification goes into the Alexa app. So if anyone wants more information on that, we can pass that over as well. So that's quite a new feature that only came out maybe about Christmas time.
Yeah. Caroline, this has been fantastic. I can see a whole host of sort of charity groups that may or may not be aware of what's there at the minute. And a bit like Jean was saying, I think we see great success when we kind of wrap stuff up in, you know, a bite-sized chunk for people to sort of get used to. You know, I think this does have an air of suspicion around it because of the level of data collected. But, you know, possibly with the right guidance and the right sort of safety factors, there may be opportunities there for some groups that are either remote or in need of more help. But Debbie, you have your hand up again. Oh.
Yeah, hi there. Hopefully the sound is a little bit better now. Apologies for that earlier.
No worries.
I've remembered what my second question was, which was in terms of some of the sort of materials and resources that are available to help. So I wondered from a sort of development and testing point of view. I mean, I think Caroline and Thomas, you've said you guys, when you've been doing things, you've tried talking to it to test it, and you know, maybe tried getting up people with slightly different accents. But for any one sort of person developing stuff to have access to a really wide range of people with different accents would be quite difficult. I wondered does Amazon itself provide any resource like that, where there are a variety of sort of, I don't know, even if it's just robotic voices that you can use to comprise words and sayings to test your application? Because I think, as Janice said in her first comment, like if the application you create is for a particular person not understanding what they're saying, it's just going to give them a really bad impression of your product. Yeah,
it's really tricky. I think I hadn't actually considered the idea of doing testing with synthetic voices. There isn't at the moment. Amazon, they don't provide any kind of testing support as such. And so when it comes to user testing, what we did was got on LinkedIn and begged and borrowed people's time, showed them our prototype, got them to be beta testers. So before you actually launch officially and go through all the formal checks with Amazon with a kind of approval process, you can have it open for beta testing. Is it up to 100 people, Thomas? Is that right?
I think so, yeah.
I think it's 100, and then it's for like a period of like 6 months, I think, is the maximum. And then over that time, you can get more information from them. We just set up Google Forms, you know, to get feedback on certain areas, because as well as us trying to make sure that it was intelligible and they could understand it, we also were looking at that conversation path as well and trying to get feedback on the style of things too. So that little user group that we engaged, I think Aberdeen's very international. It's maybe the advantage of us being in the oil capital of Europe. So a lot of my friends have a range of different accents, so that kind of worked to our advantage. But yeah, I'm not sure what else I would advise for someone. You know, the more people that you can get to test it out, the better.
You can also upload little clips. So if you did generate voices or you got various people, I think you can upload little audio clips into the dashboard, and then it can give you responses on.
Oh, okay. So you could sort of automate your testing a little bit if you'd got a voice clip that you were wanting to reuse.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah.
Oh, that's good.
I guess we've just been doing everything on a kind of small scale.
And one last question for me, I just wondered, because I'm not a developer myself, so apologies if I'm asking some really stupid questions, but my husband is. And I know he's developed apps that are sort of, that are on the Apple Store, and find that they will make changes with no notice whatsoever, and then suddenly your application breaks. Do you have that problem with Alexa, or have you found that Amazon Web Services have been pretty good?
It's not been too bad, actually. I think the changes that they make are less user interfering and more developer interfering. So the actual developer console can be down for big periods, and they give you no notification at all. And so you might be testing something or pushing something, and then you're like, why is it not working? And you think it's something that you've done in your code. Thomas spends 5 hours trying to fix something that didn't need fixed, because in fact, actually, the Amazon system inherently was down, or they were doing something. So we find that from a user's point of view, we've not had any issues, but as a developer, we quite often bang our heads against the wall because we're like, why is this not working, or why have they changed this? And for a long time, all the tutorials and all the user information was out of date. So you would get so far down the process, and then you'd be like, okay, this doesn't make any sense because this looks different. And so, yeah, that's more of an issue.
You can see where actually, because it's voice, you don't have that same if you move around screens and stuff like that in the same way. That's quite, I hadn't thought of that element of it.
There is still a little bit of that, and depending on how you design things. So that's why when Thomas mentioned about drawing like a block flow diagram to kind of go through the conversation flow, because we're going to have that issue actually going to tell Thomas now, we're going to have that issue very soon, dear, because we go through a series of questions and it's almost like going down through menus.
Yes,
so if you change that structure and
the logic structure,
knows where to find something and you've moved it, then there is potentially an issue. So we launched a few packages in our application that for the reason that Thomas was saying, you don't want to give people too many choices. So actually having nested choices, where you ask them a question and say, would you like this topic? And then within that topic, would you like this specific thing? And so sometimes drilling down like that can seem a bit laborious, but it actually is helpful in making sure you're not overwhelming people with too many choices, but you have to get that structure nailed down. And yeah, Thomas, we're going to have to change it, but it's okay.
Interesting. Thank you so much. It's been a really, really interesting talk. You can see loads of potential here as well, and thanks to everybody here. There's been a really nice level of questions as well to keep that. But thank you, Caroline and Thomas. Really appreciate you taking us through that.
You're welcome. No, and if anyone has any other questions, you can find us on LinkedIn. You are welcome to go to the TL Tech Smart website. We have loads of free resources there from a user perspective of how to use all the different features and functions, how to search for skills and find good ones. So if you want to check out any of the existing applications on the Alexa just to get a feel for what sorts of things are out there, that one might help. If you want to check our one out, literally all you say is Alexa open kind space, and then it will open. And then we have another one, which is a Pomodoro timer that helps with productivity. So you could try that one as well. It's called Focus Space. So similar thing, you just say Alexa open focus space, and you can have a look at that one as well.
I'm going to go try it. Excellent. Right. Thank you very much, everybody. Lovely to see you all.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.